Hello, good morning. Thank you for being back. The second day is always a bit more difficult to gather people, and particularly when it's a Friday and when it's Paris. So thank you very much to be here. And so before we start for the second, yesterday we had the first plenary session on partnership related to our subject, art, culture, and sustainable development. And so we'll have the second plenary today with also a diversity of speakers coming from different backgrounds, from different type of organization, and also from different countries. But before that, we would like to do some wrap-up also from the different feedback we had from the session yesterday, and I will give the word to Alison for that.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be very brief, but the themes, the key themes, there seem to be three that we will be taking forward. The first is the very clear one about partnerships and collaborations and how important they are and how many have started to be made. And I think one of the challenges is how that becomes less of an idea and a chance encounter and how that actually becomes more systemic. So we'll be talking about that, I think, during the morning and over the lunch break. The second is, of course, engagement and the complexity and diversity of engagement and the need to be to be very welcoming to all the different types of engagement, while at the same time keeping focus and keeping consensus, and above all keeping trust at the heart of that engagement, so that instead of spiraling off into an exploration of our differences, we maintain a sense of purpose and focus, which leads me on to the last point, which I think is one that came up quite a lot yesterday and is absolutely critical, which is the point about keeping urgent and focused, and the point about the way that we are at COP21, that particularly the big issue around reduction of carbon, emissions reductions, and the controlling of greenhouse gases around global warming is absolutely critical that we keep focused on that and that we remain ambitious. So in whatever capacity, whether it be an absolutely tiny context or whether it be a much, much larger context, that this is really about climate change. So keeping a really clear eye on that. And of course, within all of that, going right through it is how we come to a really good place around acknowledging the complexities of the North-South, the difference between the North and the global North and the global South. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. And one thing we would like also to propose to you, as you notice in the program, there is what we call a working lunch. So we have 2 hours where we have also more time to discuss. And at the beginning, we thought that maybe based on the idea, you want to say something, Diane, on that? Sorry. No. But yeah. Yeah, I will say, no, this one is more, no, you will say something, but it's more a bit practical. At the beginning, we wanted to maybe propose to you some subject, to discuss during the working lunch. But afterward, we thought that maybe at 12 p.m. we come back to you, and there will be, you will be the one, in fact, to suggest some key question that you would like to discuss and eventually moderate around your working lunch table. We will arrange the table. We will have also like paper and yellow sticker, and you can move around as well to discuss this kind of subject that you would like to maybe like go deeper, because yesterday maybe some of the sessions were much more broader, in the sense in which they were approached. So maybe you want to add something on that, Diane?
I was just going to say a little bit about from Ithaca, what I can take back to Ithaca. So that's what I'm thinking about when I'm listening to everybody. And I think there are 3 points for me that really came out strongly. And that's the idea of knowledge transfer and how we can facilitate that in the future, and how we can support networking and meetings where we have the World Summit on Arts and Culture in October. It's an opportunity for North and South to come together again and to talk about some of these issues. So that I'll be looking forward to that, and be taking some of the messages from here to that meeting. Inspiring leadership really came across, and so I'll be thinking about how we do that, and of course, instilling on Ithaca members that if we want to inspire arts organizations to take lead in reducing emissions and thinking about the environment, then the arts councils have to do the same, and many of them are and are really trying to do that, so that's good as well. And communicating the evidence really came across to me. It seems that the scientists have the evidence. What we need to do is find ways of connecting the scientists to the artists so that the artists can communicate that evidence more efficiently and effectively. So, yeah, those are the things that, from my point of view, I took from yesterday. Of course, there was so much more to say, and I'll be listening avidly today as well. So thank you.
Okay, so based on this different feedback from Ithaca, Julie's bicycle, and maybe the one you may have later, we will come back to you after at 12 p.m. before the working lunch, and you will suggest eventually to work on some of the topics which were suggested here, or maybe you have all other topics that you really would like to discuss and propose to the rest of the group. We thought it was more a democratic way also to work on. So we have idea, but we are very willing to hear your idea to work on that later from 12 p.m. So without further ado, I will pass the mic. So we start with, 10 minutes late, it's not too bad. So to Valeria, and you will have 10 minutes more, of course, you know, we are not that mean. Okay, thank you very much.
Very democratic offer. Thank you very much, Marie. Bonjour à tout le monde. Good morning, everybody. As we are more francophone speaking around the table, I will speak in French. By time to time, if needed, I will switch into English for our speakers. So I'm very pleased and thankful to be here. Je suis très reconnaissante d'être ici aujourd'hui avec vous parce que je pense que le fait d'être ensemble est déjà une traduction très concrète de la mission qui nous est confiée
is a concrete translation of the goals that we established this morning to reflect on solutions for sustainable development through arts and culture, and also to look at environmental questions to see how we as cultural actors can actually integrate environmental questions into our work on a day-to-day basis. As Marie said, this question was already looked at yesterday, so we're going to try to go further on the question of partnerships today. And I'm going to ask the presenters this morning, who are from public bodies and private bodies, and we want to hear their experiences around a few key questions. So when we're talking about partnerships, we could look at perhaps 4 different aspects. So I'm going to first introduce the presenters. Olivier Darnay from the République Forestière, Margaret Chu, founder and director of Bamboo Curtain Studio, then Martha Bisman, who is the senior project manager for WIP Renewable Energies. To my left, Leonidas José de Oliveira, president of the Municipal Foundation and Councillor for Culture, City of Belo Horizonte, and Clarissa Ruiz Correal, and lastly Nathalie Babette, director of the PETR in Sungo in France. So I'm going to ask our speakers to look at questions of culture and environment, questions of lifestyle, how our lifestyles can influence positively or negatively environmental questions, how environment plays a role in our lifestyles, and how do we adapt to it, and how can we as cultural actors in our day-to-day work, how do we bring in the question of environment into the way we design projects, into our organizations, and as artists ourselves or cultural actors or public authorities, how do we work to make people aware, how do we make citizens aware of these questions? How do we really get them to participate in our projects and to understand the issues that we've been talking about since yesterday morning, culture and climate change? Because of course, climate change is first and foremost a question of life. I'm going to actually hand over the floor to Belo Horizonte first, and they are going to talk to us about their cooperation models in this field.
Bonjour.
Hello, everybody. I don't.
Okay. Next, please. In 2013, the city launched a series of transformations in its cultural policies, having as an axis, besides the decentralization, the regionalization of culture. Within 40 territories, it strategically divided and unified into the city. In 2014, after a long debate connected to the reforms of Agenda 21, along with the support of UCLG, a new project has been put into practice, the new Agenda 21 directives, were tools that formed the new municipal law of culture, from which various actions emerged. It is some of things that I want to point out in the meeting today. Meanwhile, our base is a sustainable development of culture, where social cohesion, as well as social inclusion through art, as a factor of development, are possible. This is strategic axis adopted. Next, please. By the end of 2015, the number of people forming the attending and participating public grew up to 3 million persons, while in 2013 it was limited to 600,000. Today, polls show that the pulse of culture in Belo Horizonte is the one. Among all cities policies of different kinds that enjoys the best level of satisfaction from citizens. But let's begin. 3. Within the political and economic crisis the Brazil is experiencing, the part of partnerships is, the every level, fundamental. This led to a process of growth of affection and solidarity, and placed culture away from political conflicts. It rendered it a constructor of solidarity society, but at the same time politics conscious. But how did we guide our actions? No. No. Okay. Excuse me. But how did we guide our actions? We acted as an articulator, yes. We listened to those involved. We optimized the use of resources. We created specific programs to promote local and cultural diversity. We involved both private sector and civil society. In other words, we viewed the civil society as a partner and not as a client of public services. Next. we created partnerships with private sector, the civic society, as well as with other public sector agencies, learning that the area of culture has been a space of many conflicts and contradictions at every level. The weekly meetings create a new agreement, study the diversity of cultural heritage. We learn to live together with the dialectics, but with common projects, like graphics all around the city, funded by the state, but if the local is important. So, is working is an interdisciplinary way, cross-cutting different areas. The Creative City Committee, which we will see with more details later on, is coordinated by the Foundation of Culture, but affects all areas, and especially urban planning for a more human approach. The reason behind the original discourse of the Zona Cultural Stations Square, which was the principal place of opposition's manifestations towards of the current government, is not the paralyzation of oppositions, but rather to construct and coexist with affection, to eventually change to what we believe is the best. Next. Through the Adopt a Cultural Good program, it has been possible to transfer resources from rich zones to poor ones, by compensating the damages in immaterial heritage. The Council of Heritage authorizes works of low impact in rich zones, but asks for compensations in zones of more necessity, including the whole city into this process. Next. Next. This is important. The Zona Cultural Council concerns the marketing area around a central square with intense cultural activity. Yes, next. The civil society requested the establishment of a committee to set guidelines for cultural occupation of this area. Members are locals and traders in the region, representations of universities, technicians for after areas of the municipality. Is next. 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 Oh. Finally, the big chain of this process, and I am shortly concluding, is the fact that the cultural governance has been supported by the population participating actively in every decision-making procedure in the city. We believe that it will be impossible for culture, as well as for education and health, traditionally areas of priority for the government, not to be at the front lines during next year elections. There is still much to be done, but the power of the streets, the people, the popular culture, the artists of the periphery, got into light and found at that in Kanchai. And as you know, culture does not forget, it advances and moves for being pioneer. We believe in this. It is in this we work, and along with UCLG, we are even stronger to be able together to contribute the most effective way for a more human and a more spiritual happy world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leonidas José de Oliveira. Je vais maintenant passer la parole à Clarissa
Going
Ruiz,
to
conseillère pour la
give the
culture,
floor
les
to
loisirs et le sport de la
Clarissa
ville de
Ruiz,
Bogota.
who is the
Nous venons de
counselor
voir par l'exemple de
for
Belo
culture,
Horizonte,
leisure
si on
and
parle d'une
sport, the
approche
city of
multi-acteurs,
Bogota in
quel
Colombia.
peut être le rôle qu'il a parlé de
If we
facilitateur,
speak about
d'une collectivité
a
territoriale, ça peut aussi se poser au niveau national.
multi-approach, multi-actor approach, it can also be something that is going to facilitate the sustainability and the way citizens actually decide to make projects theirs.
Merci. Bon, je vais
Thank you very much.
parler de notre plan
I'm going to speak
de
to you about
développement à la
our
ville de
development
Bogota.
plan
Il
in
s'appelle
Bogota. It's
Humana.
called Bogota
Et
Humana,
il
the plan for
s'agit,
development.
vraiment
And
pas d'une humanité conventionnelle. On
it's
a
not a
essayé de,
conventional plan, I would
aller
say.
au-delà de
We really tried to go beyond
l'anthropocentrisme.
the
Plutôt, il s'agit d'un monde
anthropocentrism of
possible,
these
d'un dialogue
plans,
avec la
typically.
nature, un dialogue
And so
avec
we
la
wanted to
nature
establish a dialogue with
animaux
nature, with
et
animals,
avec autrui. Un
and
dialogue
with the
avec
other.
la différence et la diversité.
So dialogue with the diversity and
Ce n'est
difference
que- ce
present
sont
in
que des
our
photos
city.
après pour vous montrer les
I have a
projets.
few photos simply to show you the
Il
projects. I don't have a
faut aussi
PowerPoint
que
as
je vous
such.
parle du contexte de notre
I
ville, de notre
want to
pays,
speak to
où
you
nous
briefly
sommes
about the
dans un
context
dialogue
of our
de paix.
city, where we are in a
Nous faisons des
peace
accords de paix.
dialogue. We are in the
Et,
process of negotiating
et
peace
dans
accords.
ce processus
And in this
de
process,
60 ans plus
which
et
has
plus,
taken more than 60 years at this
nous
point,
nous nous demandons
we have
et
wondered all
jour par
along
jour, avec des débats,
uh,
qu'est-ce qu'on comprend
what
par la paix? Qu'est-ce qu'on
does
entend
peace mean?
être la paix? Et parmi ces idées,
And among the different ideas that have been put forth, the strongest ones were
la paix ne s'agit
that
pas
peace
d'une absence de conflit.
is not simply the lack of
On
conflict.
appelle ce qui viendra après les
What
accords
comes
de paix,
after
le post-conflit.
Of course, what comes after the peace accords is the post-conflict era. But for us, peace is not simply just the lack of conflict.
Ce qui nous a amenés à
And
la guerre, à ces confrontations internes.
this
Et une des causes aussi,
civil
parce que le
war
marché du drogue, il a
it
aussi
was the
mené.
result also of a drug
Mais
trade.
c'est
And we can't simply say that a lack of
l'importance
conflict
de
is going to bring us to
l'opposition, de la
peace.
différence et
We
de la-
also must say
de
that this
pouvoir
conflict is
gérer.
based on a
Alors, la
lack
paix,
of
c'est une
understanding for our
maturité
differences, and peace
de
for
la
us is
possibilité de gérer ce
maturity
conflit interne.
and
de gérer
the
les
ability
conflits
finally
avec
to
la
manage this
non-violence,
internal conflict,
mais
manage this
d'avoir
conflict in
des
a
oppositions.
non-violent way,
Dans
but
ce
still to
cadre-là,
have differences
ce que
and to
nous
be able
avons
to discuss
proposé,
with our
cet
differences.
homme, cette humanité diverse.
So
cette
what we really have
humanité
focused on is the diversity, the
nous avons
plurality of
travaillé en 3 lignes,
humanity. We've
la
worked on
séparation de la
3 lines
ségrégation,
specifically:
le soin des sources
separation and
d'eau,
segregation,
de la
secondly,
structure hydrique de
water
notre
ecology
cité, de notre ville,
in our
et
city,
le renforcement du
and
pouvoir public.
reinforcement of the
Dans
public
tous ces 3 lignes,
authorities.
la
So these
culture,
3
travaille,
different aspects of the peace accords
le système
all
public,
have a
et
role for
nous avons
culture.
compris la culture comme un devoir,
And
mais aussi
culture
comme une
for us is a
liberté,
duty, but
comme une
also
question
a
de
source of
garantie
freedom.
de la
It
préservation du
is possible
patrimoine,
for us
mais
to
aussi
use culture to
comme le
preserve our
renouvellement
heritage and
et
also
la
renew
possibilité de création
our
de
city and
partout,
our
de tout le monde,
society.
de
And
de
we want to give
chacun
the
dans la ville.
opportunity to everyone
Et
in our
donc,
city to have
avec
the
cette,
possibility to
matrice
create.
dynamique,
And so
nous
we've created a
avons,
dynamic
et
matrix
fixé
that
des projets Et
allowed us to develop
parmi lesquels
specific
les
projects.
plus importants,
Among
c'était
these projects,
d'introduire dans l'éducation
we
la
introduced
culture,
within the public
l'éducation
education
artistique et le
system
sport.
an
Parce qu'il
artistic
y a
and
aussi
sport
une
program.
ségrégation dans la connaissance,
Because
dans l'épistémologie,
We must
une
say
ségrégation des savoirs.
there's been a division of knowledge within the school system. Arts and sport have not been seen as important for quite some years, and so it was very important to us to reintegrate these into public education. And for us, this was also a way to teach people about democracy. And culture was part of this work on habitat, on water ecology, on clean air. And so we worked by interacting, by cooperating, not in a bureaucratic fashion. We really wanted to work with our partners at the town halls, or at the town hall of Bogota, in a cooperative partnership, not in a bureaucratic way. Our aim was also to make sure that all different lifestyles were recognized as being legitimate. We worked to make sure that there was participation from citizens in the decision-making process, as well as participation of the public authorities in creating these projects. So we worked hard
pour Gare à la Tauromachie, ce qui a en 4 ans permis de
over the course of 4 years,
87% de la
and we noticed that 87% of our city was actually against Tauromachie. And what we saw just a few days ago, we noticed that our Congress is still occupied by elites, and it makes it very difficult for animal welfare laws to get through our Congress.
Il y a beaucoup de groupes qui sont ont dans les mains cette position animaliste.
There were a number of groups who worked hard to try to get a law on animal welfare pushed through Congress. And we have seen that there's a number of communities around Bogota who are in danger. And the rivers around Bogota are very polluted, and this is also a danger for these communities. We have also worked to make sure that graffiti is no longer a crime in Bogota, and we've created walls that are specifically for graffiti in Bogota, and we've worked with young people on the theme of street art. We've also worked on the Zero Waste project. We've worked with the Zero Waste project, and all of our concert halls, all our stadiums, etc., they're all working, cultural spaces, they're all working with this Zero Waste project. So it's really work that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. We've made a museum of waste, and we're working with men and women who work in the waste disposal chain, because obviously there are a lot of people who work in waste disposal, and we wanted to also include them in our work. We have also worked on public transport and encouraging people to use alternative modes of transport, such as bicycles, which obviously changes the city quite a bit. A city of 8 million people could change quite a lot if more people use their bicycle. This is just a short presentation on some of our projects, and I want to thank you for your attention. Thank you, Clarissa. I think that your presentation now is a good bridge to Olivier's work, because if we're thinking about multi-actor partnerships and trying to understand what the role of each person is in trying to change behaviors and attitudes. You've showed a few examples where a local government, through the diversity of the population, has worked hard to make cross-cutting policies and make sure that different forms of knowledge are present in the policies. You spoke about museums and transport. These, of course, can be in partnership with the private sector, but which need a political will to get them through. So hopefully in the different presentations, we're going to see what the role of all these different structures can be in these partnerships. So I'm going to hand over the floor to Olivier.
Merci, bonjour.
It's better if I take the artist. So I am an artist and I work in a collective that I founded in 2003 and it's called the Poetic Party. It is set in the north of Paris, Saint-Denis, and I try to find an image where we could all recognize ourselves with. And this is the one I thought. And I thought it was a way to actually ask ourselves what is public and what is some kind of a treasure. Trésor public meaning the state money administration, to cut it short. So this legitimacy that we question in the public space is something we do with an animal. So what I want to show you this morning is how the relationship with economy for an artist collective we started 10 years ago with 80% of public funding, and now we only have 10 or 15%. So how did we do to actually keep working and keep existing? Because the idea is not only make events or put installation of sculptures in the public space. What is important is the continuity. It's to keep existing. The public treasure actually for me is there. These are beehives. So these public treasures we've been developing, as for myself, since 1996. So we put beehives in the public space, and bees have been on Earth for 80 million years. So we, as a collective, have a relationship with an animal that is both a medium and a revelator. So in Saint-Denis, we have a center with 8 million bees. We're trying to have the biggest beehive in Europe, but still not to make honey. One of the results of the pollination of the city, it's not the objective, because we are not beekeepers. You know, it would be much simpler. We would try to make honey, and we will actually make a living out of it. Our idea is more to work on the way bees work, so as to ask ourselves questions, and we also therefore want to question the ecosystem. We started to realize that in a relationship with the animal, the bees were making honey, and we thought that this was a treasure that did not really belong to us, but belonged to the community. So we wanted to actually create this public service of pollination. So we called it concrete honey, and a lot of people think it's very good because we sell it. And obviously, we realized that this honey with 250 plants in it was a real representative of the cultural diversity. In Saint-Denis, we have 170 communities, 170 communities that go back and forth from their origin country to Saint-Denis, and this matches in a way the diversity of the flowers we get in this suburban town on the northeast of Paris. So in 27, we put this beehive of 80,000 bees on the plaza of the Pompidou Center. The idea is to try to find the taste of Paris, but also find how people can communicate. The idea is to get yourself locked in the beehive and rediscover as such the actual spectacle of nature. And what is really nice is the transformation of that is meditation-like of something that actually goes beyond us. It's rather hypnotic or mesmerizing, but that shows how this work we do through an animal mediator in a way. We don't reproduce, and we are not doing street art, like we would tour something. We work on questions, and a question will open another question the year after. So the question actually goes through, and the question is something that we share with the others. And this is a little cashier, if you want, of pollinization, or desk for pollinization. And we thought it was better to do hive. And there is a paradox in making honey in the city, and there is a similarity in French between what the bees are doing, and there are many territories where the bees actually don't have time to make honey because they die before, and there is some kind of industrial agriculture that actually produces money but also produces death. So we created a project that ridiculized the political dimension of the death of the bees, and we created this bank of honey. So there we are in Geneva. It was rather logical. As this image shows it, it's a dark bank. It's black and it's obscure. So if our aim was to produce honey would be rich, and if we wanted to produce so on the left, you've got this kind of safe where you put money, and we have some kind of saving account that work with the bees, and in front of it we've got 450 bees, and in between we've got some kind of corridor, so we transform it in some kind of floor. So this is our saving bee account. Today we have 2,500 members, people who put in normal money, and then we actually did another bank in Rennes, and we were the award winners of the Coral Prize in 2012. This is a banquet, a bank banquet. We put people all together around a table, and we just make them around this table to think about, what is the loot, because there is a play on word in French on loot and on what the bees are doing, which is, so we ask ourselves how we can reinvest money. Money is the bees. We're all artists, we're all independent, four of us, and we've got this permanence on a territory, but also on the way we actually gather all over. Sometimes we, you know, at the moment, some of us are in residency in Norway. Time is not only money, so there we are in The Hague, and we produce culture. This bank in Rennes, we invented a machine, and the money disappears and goes directly and is invested in a bank. So this is an exchange bureau, you know, and this would enable us to transform the energy of money. So, well, I won't speak to you about the Forestry Republic. The idea is about the Greater Paris is producing towns, and we also ask ourselves how we could produce more life and more biomass in an urban environment. I think we have to awake very quickly to see how we could create a new urban forest. This is in the continuity of the honey project. It is a forest of 700 trees in a few days, and the idea is to work with the population so as to reinvest public spaces with, you know, all generations, but also with corporations. Thank you.
Merci Olivier. Donc je pense que
Thank you, Olivier. I think that among the interesting things you evoked, we can see the question of sustainability, which was really there from the beginning of this project. You looked at financial questions and also the question of time, a process over time. And that's two key factors that need to really be taken into account from the beginning when we're designing a project. Make sure that these projects have a long-term existence in these cities where we're working. So I'm going to hand the floor to Nathalie Verbet, who is the director of PETR in the Sundgau region in France. And she's going to speak about how city inhabitants were able to work to give a new dynamic to their city. Good morning, and first of all, thank you to the organizers for giving us a chance to present this project. This is a more rural project. I have a project that brings together 7 different communities and cities, which is in a rural area in the south of the Alsace region. So from time to time, I'm going to be giving you words in Alsatian. So this is a collectivity that deals with land use management, and we work in culture and in the field of the energy transition. So just to give you an idea, this is where we are. We're in the south of Alsace, between Germany and Switzerland. Of course, in France, between Germany and Switzerland. I'm going to present a project to you, and about this project, I'm going to show you how we were able to change local policy. This project is called Stuva. That's an Alsatian word. I'll explain what it means later. This was a very specific choice that we made for this word. And our goal was to link France and Alsatian identity, of course, because the Alsatian language is part of this region's culture. So this project took about 6 years to mature and to finally be implemented. It took 6 years because I think we simply weren't ready initially. And in 2008, the project, the initial ideas were developed, and at the time we thought that this should only be an artistic project, but since it took 6 years, it of course changed over this time. And in 2009, we launched a climate plan. And at that point, this project became a culture and sustainable development project. So 6 years to convince the public authorities that these two questions were actually important for them. And in 2014, elected officials decided to work on the strengths of our landscape. And in 2014, these policies really, our questions, our project really finally became part of local policy. So once elected officials, this is 112 mayors who were voting on this, and it's not easy to convince every single one of them, of course, but they finally decided that we would be able to implement this project. They decided that we would be a structure for local development and not a cultural body. And that was perhaps a judicious choice, because we wanted to have an artistic project, of course, but by being a local development project, it was perhaps easier to get this through the local politicians. And we also had an association with the European cultural body. So we chose the name Stuwa. If you speak German, it's the German word originally is Stub, and the meaning of this is simply the living room in a house. And we wanted to create a space, a living space, where inhabitants could participate in implementing this project, and of course then reappropriate these artworks and reappropriate the sustainable development policy. So Stuwa is really a symbol for us of a space where we live together. So Stuwa's ecosystem, of course, we have several projects, several partnerships. Local authorities were, of course, partners with us, and we were there to implement this project. And our goal was to get as many people involved as possible. First, of course, we had to find funders, and it was because we actually found our funders first that the elected officials decided to vote in favor of this project, because we already had the funding. We also wanted to have all the different levels, city, regional, local. So these are institutional partners for us, and then we have other partnerships, more artistic partnerships. We called on a curator, a museum curator who of course knows the artists, and that's what we needed, was a good network amongst artists. And of course we wanted the civil society to also be involved. So we have a local point person for each artwork, because we have 7 artworks, one per city that was involved, or village really that was involved. So each artwork had a point person, a local point person, who really was the person who mediated between us and the local community.
Donc je souhaitais aussi rappeler que effectivement je suis pas bien, là, je vais me mettre debout.
I'm going to stand up. I can't really see the screen, so I'm going to stand up in the middle of this presentation. So let's talk about the artistic approach. Of course, the artists have chosen different works. We have artworks about monoculture, about deforestation, but the artists left a real physical trace on this landscape. And these artists really worked with the local communities. They did pedagogical work in the schools.
fait travailler aussi les entreprises
And the
locales.
artists also made sure to call on local businesses for their materials. So it was really a locally driven effort.
Mais on a aussi dû avoir une véritable approche
But we
pédagogique
also,
avec
worked
les élus locaux.
With
Et,
the schools,
les
and we had to
territoires.
actually do some
Donc, avant de,
teaching
pour faire en
activities
sorte
for
que ce
local
projet soit
officials
accepté,
as
parce
well.
qu'à la base,
Because in order to get this project
c'était pas
accepted,
forcément le cas. Pendant
it was
un
not
an,
easy
on
at first. So
a,
for an entire
travaillé
year, we
toute une
actually
approche
worked
pédagogique.
with
Donc, on a fait
elected
des
officials.
conférences à
We
destination
did
des
conferences
élus
for
sur,
elected
comment
officials
installer des
about
œuvres d'art dans
how
l'espace public.
we can put public
On a
works,
f-
public
on les a
artworks
emmenés
in public
visiter,
spaces.
des exemples
We
du
visited
parcours d'art
examples
contemporain sur, la question du développement
in
durable en
other
Meuse. On
places.
leur a
For
fait
example,
visiter des
in
projets innovants
Meuse,
sur la
we
transition
visited
énergétique.
innovative
On a
projects
fait
about
également des
energy
ateliers
about the
participatifs,
energy
donc à
transition.
destination de la
We
population,
also
avec, voilà,
visited
différents intervenants.
other projects that
surtout,
involved
je pense que
the
c'est en
implication
ça-
of local
c'est pour ça que
communities.
le projet a fonctionné.
And I think that's why this
On a,
project was
la
finally successful,
collectivité porteuse
because
n'a pas choisi
the
les œuvres.
villages themselves
nous avons
didn't
fait un
choose the
comité de
artwork that would
sélection,
be
et c'est
in their
chaque
village. We had
commune
a selection
avec un
committee, and
référent de la population
each
qui a choisi
community
l'œuvre qui allait s'implanter dans sa commune.
had a member in the selection committee who was able to
Voilà,
decide
donc,
which artwork
il y
should
avait une
then go where.
véritable implication citoyenne avec
So
les
the
collectivités.
community,
Donc,
local communities
comme
were
je vous disais,
really
c'est la commune.
involved.
Nous sommes le porteur de projet, mais c'est
We
bien en fin de compte la commune
We're the
qui est
bearers of this
devenue
project,
le
but
vrai
it
fer de
was the
lance
different
de cette
villages
commune, en fait.
who
Ensuite, tous les
actually
ouvriers communaux
really
ont été
implemented the project.
associés à la mise en place de l'œuvre. Pourquoi? Parce qu'en fin de
And we
compte, si on
called on
souhaite que
local
l'œuvre soit
workers
pérenne,
to
à un
actually
moment, quand on
install
installe l'œuvre,
the
il faut
artwork.
aussi que les ouvriers communaux qui ensuite
And of
vont
course,
entretenir
that's
cette
important
œuvre
because
soient
it's the local
impliqués
workers who
en
are going
amont
to
dans cette
maintain
installation.
the artwork in the future,
Donc,
so
on
they
a les
need to be
référents
involved right from the
locaux,
beginning in
qui sont
installing it.
l'interface entre l'artiste,
So
la
we
commune,
called
le
on
pays,
local
etc. et
businesses
qui vraiment
to do
a
this.
pour rôle de faciliter l'intégration de l'œuvre dans le
And they
village.
also helped us integrate the artwork into the
Et
life
enfin,
of the
les
village.
associations, ce
And
sont
then
là
local
également, ce n'est pas la
associations
collectivité qui a organisé le
worked with us.
vernissage, mais c'est les associations
It was
de
actually
chaque
local
village qui ont
associations
organisé
in
le
each village who
vernissage de chaque
organized
œuvre.
the vernissage, the unveiling of each artwork.
Donc là, vous avez
So what you
donc
see
ce
here
fameux vernissage. On est
is
parti en
the
bus, on a
unveiling
appelé Stuva
of
Circus
each
et on allait de village en
artwork,
village.
and we went
Et chaque
around to all the
village
7 different
avait,
villages.
préparer son
We actually took a
vernissage
bus
avec l'artiste, avec
around to
les
each
associations
village,
locales,
and
avec les
each
écoles.
village had
Et ça a vraiment
a
donné
different
une
unveiling
ambiance.
ceremony
On
that they
comprenait,
had
en fait, que
designed
chaque
with
village s'était
schools or with
approprié
local
cette
communities,
œuvre,
and we
et
saw that
cette
each
œuvre
village had
devenait
really
l'œuvre du
reappropriated
village.
the artwork, and it had become an
plus de la
artwork of the
collectivité.
village and not just something imposed on them by an
Et
external
enfin,
body.
mon propos, c'était de dire que c'est un
I also
tout
wanted
petit
to
projet,
add that
mais
this is
c'est
a
un
small
projet qui a
project, of course,
participé à,
but it's a project
au lancement d'une véritable dynamique
that
d'une
launched
politique
a
nouvelle
new
qui allait germer,
policy dynamic
qui a
in the
permis
region.
de s'interroger sur qu'est-ce qu'on
And
veut
we were
faire
able
aujourd'hui,
at a
qu'est-ce que
higher
vers
level
où
to
les
start
élus veulent aller,
wondering
quelle
and
transition
asking questions
énergétique on veut mettre en
about
place sur
the
notre
energy
territoire et quelles sont
transition,
les
about
actions
sustainable
qui
development,
vont en
and what
découler.
types of
Et
cultural
en fait,
projects
Stuva,
might be
ça a
involved
ça a
in
permis
these debates. And the
donc,
Stuva
voilà,
project
c'est
really
un
managed to get
projet
these
qui a permis
debates into
l'émergence d'autres projets.
the public
Et aujourd'hui,
space and
on
into
va
the work of the elected
réhabiliter,
officials.
la maison
So
d'un
what
ancien
are
peintre
our
sur
future
le
projects?
thème
Well,
du
we're going to
paysage.
renovate
On a créé un
the house
cercle
of a
de
19th
mécènes
century
de territoire
painter.
où
We
ce sont
created
les
a
entreprises
network
qui
of
deviennent
corporate
actrices
patrons,
de leur territoire, entreprises locales.
patrons who are
On
going
crée
to
un
work
projet de
within their own
ressourcerie dans une
villages.
friche,
We
et on a différents projets
also created a
d'économie circulaire
recycling
dans les friches,
project and a circular economy
voilà,
project.
donc un petit projet qui
So
engendre
I would say that
d'autres
this is a
petits
small
projets,
project
puis
that has
chacun met une
launched
petite
other
bit, et fait
small
évoluer,
projects,
donc,
and so
le schéma.
bit by bit we're moving forward.
Merci, c'était très rapide.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci beaucoup, Nathalie.
Thank you, Natalie.
Je pense qu'ici ont été évoqués d'autres points importants.
I think we
C'est la
heard a
conception
number of
du
other
partenariat
points.
même comme
The idea
clé
that
des réussites sur les
designing
enjeux
the
de
partnership
durabilité.
is very important.
Ensuite, on est un petit peu dans un
right
cas
from the beginning.
inverse, mais du coup complémentaire des cas de
I think,
Bogota et de Belo Horizonte.
We
Ici,
could
on a
see
une
that there's
volonté
a
forte politique
you have a different approach from what we saw in Bogota.
En partenariat avec Agenda 21 Culture et CGLU. Là, nous sommes dans un cas inverse où on fait de la pédagogie.
Basically, here you start by doing teaching programs with the elected officials who will then bring these policies and this dynamic to a higher level, politically speaking.
Et ensuite, donc il y a la question qui
So now we're going to look at the question
de la pollinisation.
Of pollinization, or you spoke about pollinization as well. It's similar to Olivier's presentation. How a small project can actually change behavior and change attitudes and help to establish a new link between culture and environment. I think we're going to now move straight to Margaret. She's the founder and director of Bamboo Curtain Studio. And she's going to speak to us about a bottom-up dynamic with the civil society.
Bonjour, and thank you very much for inviting me. And I am quite aware we are coming from a part of Asia with probably the impact is quite different. The culture development, working with fast-paced economic development. This is a case when I want to show you about collaboration. And Bamboo Curtain Studio is where we are artists in residency for 20 years. I'm working with artists and in the last 10 years, I've been much more aware about working with artists crossing over. And we have been concerned about certain issues, and especially my partner, curator artist Wu Mali. She's an environmental activist, and she has been asking questions. And together we have proposed this project. And this is the one that I would like to show. What happened is really what's happening in many parts of Asia, that there's many creeks running into water, into the stream, and from the stream into the river, and talking about water issues and pollution issues. It's all because of overdevelopment. It used to be 20 years ago a small, quiet, urban village with eco and farmers, but the subway came, and then from 1 million to 5 million people, and a beautiful creek became destroyed because there are a lot of newcomers come in and they don't care. They are just commuters, and there would be many sewage coming from the new development and the high rise, and the erratic flooding is happening because of overdevelopment and construction. So basically, our vision as artists, Wumali and I said, we got to do something about it because the creek is right next to me. Whenever it's overflooded, it comes over to me, and then I get nothing but sewage. So it is direct impact. Okay. Now, in situ, we just say we have to do something that will make people be aware how to make it so that the public and the people that live there understand and find a way that we can live in harmony and understand what is possible. This is where we realize we are artists. And this is where creative city thinking let me realize, by the way, I told her yesterday, I'm an economist. I'm a social economist, and I became artist. And I will say I'm now a culture economics. And this is where I look at capital assets. There are many kinds of assets that we don't have. We can ask other people. This is where I collaborate. And this is where I feel we have to use art, but in a way that can reach out to the maximum number of people, and not just a little thing at a time. That's what we have been doing for about 15 years. And we decided to make any change and to have government aware and to have real concrete possibility. You have to hit it hard. And this is how we did it. We have open call, we reach the public, and we ask for partnership. The pretty much difficult things, but we hit with the local and the regional and the national, and most important, that's why we're here, international. We most important want to reach to the local authorities with the local citizens, work with the farmers, work with the concept of these people that live in the big buildings, and work with the old people that used to live there. And my main interest is to work with children, high school and elementary school, and they are the future and they grew up here, and they are the ones that can make the difference for future. And this is where I want to learn from them. And also, our strategy is multi-pronged. I'm sorry that the image is not very clear, but you can see from here that I work with many government institutions. They were quite reluctant at first. We tried many years, nobody bothered with us. Eventually tried public art. They said, where's the art? This is a process. I want the art. So we didn't get it. But eventually we got curatorial support from the National Foundation. But once we get recognition from the foundation, we can open doors. We opened doors to the government. They said, we don't have to pay us. Permit me to do what I want to do. You don't have to give me money. We work with national NGOs. There are many, especially Green Party, Women's Association, bird watchers. They're all willing to work with us because they say they have been trying very hard, but they need artists to have the story come up for them. They're willing to work with us. Local government, local NGOs, local communities, and they are the ones that say, yes, we have been trying to talk to government, but for political and other reasons, they don't listen to us. So we said we'll be the facilitator for that diverse image and possibility. But most important, I don't have much money. And this is my working horse, is the universities. Many universities work with us, MFA students, engineers in the university department, and they all work together with us because they say there's a way that they can be engaged and test what they want to do. And many of them work with us to the schools. And most important, we work with international artists. We need fresh perspective of other people's cases. And they also come and they say, you know, Margaret, I have this idea. But when I work with you and I see how you do it, then I realize my idea can have impact. So it's a benefit both ways. And we promote it into so-called many biennales. We are accepted. And we are now having the opportunity, especially to work specifically in Asia, because there are many issues in Asia. And we want to see how it can make a difference of this prototype. And when we were working through this project, we were recognized by many other international NGOs, and we have many possibility to promote this concept, like Gala in Julie's Bicycle in Europe last year. And we are now going to set up next week with my managing director, Iris, over here, to start up Gala Asia in our own studio. So is it effective and is it efficient? And I would say after 5 years, we would say we have worked very hard and we produce many things. And I will show you what to do. And what is really coming out is that we demanded, with all this public image, we demanded that the government listen to us. And the long-term impact, and I think is the most important, is that we got the public trust. We take the community and the students and the people trekking every month up and down to see the water and see how it was and how it became. Talk to the local people, eat with the locals, learn from the locals, listen to the elders, have community workshop day and night and every weekend, and then learn from other people in the region. Work with United Nations on water quality, report back to them. Work with housewives to present shops and workshops on enzyme, bring the kids to smell the smelly water, and let the kids make their own work there. And most important, we have presentations. You have to have outcomes. And that's when the politicians come, the civil servants come. They have to be able to get the votes. And that's when I make them promise. The kids say, this is my future. I have a future here. The community newspaper, every month they let the newspaper know that the community is doing something. And eventually, we'll be able to bring the community to speak up to the local officials and demand a hearing, and that there would be waterworks, but the waterworks will be according to what the local people want. And the other impact, which I'm really happy, is the system that we work with artists, many artists, local and international, is accepted because we got accepted to the National Science Museum that we use artists for art and ecology education. This impact, most important is, eventually we won the equivalent to the Turner Prize in Taiwan from the private sector. And with the budget, we can continue and keep going. And that we were able to get it going to the point that also with that, the government recognizes us in many other ways. And that we can have a way to have impact with many different issues now when it comes to environment issues. But we cannot stop. We stop working, that's the end of our effort. We build up with the community, and we work with institutions, we work with national government and local government. And there's right now the next big issue is the low carbon. After all, we're here for that. Not so much about pollution, but there's an expressway coming next to me, and that's, again, direct impact. And this is where I'm coming here, and I hope that I'll be able to join and dare to speak up. Because they say, Margaret, you should join. I said, God, I don't know how as artists. I think I know now. The challenge, as you told me, I am an economist. I look at the SWOT test. My strength, I've been around, I hang around, and I know what's I'm worth now, and people trust us. Our weakness, we're still very dependent on funding support. We're an NGO. An NGO meaning you get partial support. So where's the rest? From my pocket. Okay, it doesn't work. So eventually, I am getting old, and I need to have young people come on. My potential and my threat. My potential, I can see a lot. That this is time that we change into our business model, not as an NGO, but a social enterprise. How can I work with a board of wider advisors? How can I focus more on ecology and not art and whatever, but how I can really make it people's and public-private, and how I can work in a way with, yesterday I was quite impressed with Lilo, where they work with startups and where you can feed it back, and they're young people with many of these apps that can help with us, and how I can take the business on. But my biggest threat is there are a lot of artists and a lot of people say, is this art? I've learned now, coming here, I don't care. I think it's creativity and innovation. The long-term vision of politicians, they go in cycles. The silo mentality of the government bureau, this is not my department, it's theirs, go seek them. They never talk together, things don't get solved. And basically, is this link to society? A lot of artists, I feel, are left behind. When the more I go forward, the more they are leaving me behind. And I think this is something we have to go back and work with our artists that walk the walk yourself. If you don't join me, at least you be low carbon yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Margaret. Very inspiring presentation. And I don't know how to wrap up for the some of things that you told us. Je reprends en français. Si, donc, je pense que sur les deux dernières interventions, il y a un enjeu commun qui est celui de l'identité du territoire. D'un côté, elle a été prise en compte par l'autorité publique elle-même. Là, c'est un acteur de la société civile, un citoyen qui s'est rendu compte d'un problème et qui essaye de mobiliser cette communauté autour de cet enjeu et de faire jeu commun.
And really to try to make this a shared problem and make the public authorities aware of this problem, a problem that had not been noticed by public authorities. So we can see here that there are conflicts sometimes between the different priorities, economic priorities, sustainable development priorities, and so our job in the different dimensions of sustainable development development, and it needs to be environmentally friendly, sustainable, social, and economically feasible. And what we've seen is that it's important to share our knowledge. It gives us courage, it makes us feel part of a community, and when we see the solutions of other people, we might be able to actually adopt these solutions for our own problems. And so I think it's important that we have platforms in place where this information can be shared on a long-term basis. Olivier's work questions the viability of our economic model, and of course there is the issue of public funding. We don't want to be dependent on the public authorities necessarily. We want to be independent in our ideas and use this independence to engage dialogue and really dialogue with public authorities who then will become our partners. So now I'm going to look at the public-private partnership with Martha Bisman, who's going to be speaking to us about a project that was also launched by the private sector and which really asks questions about what our responsibility is as organizers of events.
Good morning. I'm very happy to be here. I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me. I'm going to present to you a project which emerged, a public-private partnership, which emerged from a European Union-funded project. I'm working for a company called WIP Renewable Energies, based in Munich, and the company has more than 30 years experience in developing and coordinating projects in the field of sustainable energy and projects which are funded by the European Union programs. Why am I here today? It's because I'm passionate. I'm very passionate about music. I used to be a passionate club goer myself. So I was so passionate that I started to promote my own clubbings and festivals while I was studying. I was studying renewable energies, a topic I'm also very passionate about. And I have the privilege to combine both fields in my work I'm doing, and I'm also passionate and interested about the bigger challenges, the bigger questions humankind is currently facing. So one of the big challenges is dependency on imports of fossil fuels, especially for the European Union and the West as a whole. So these days in Paris, everybody's talking about climate change. Yes, the burning of fossil fuels is driving climate change, but this is not the only problem that is being that relates to the use of fossil energy. Only this year, Germany has received 900,000 refugees, and there is no sign that this is going to stop. So, and there is also no doubt that the conflict in the area these refugees are escaping from are related to conflict over fossil fuels, oil and gas. What's the answer to that? The answer is intelligent energy. We have to shift to a low zero carbon energy system. Intelligent energy is saving energy, energy efficiency, and producing it from clean renewable sources. And this is a definition by Matt Black from Coldcut, a friend of mine and a co-campaigner. He's also the founder of the music label Ninja Tunes, which is based in London. So what role does the music event sector play in that intelligent energy future? First of all, in order to organize an event, a lot of energy is needed to power the sound and the lighting systems, to bring people to the event, to bring the artists and the event goers from their homes to the festival or the clubs. So this is one reason. There's a lot of energy saving potential in events, festivals, indoor, outdoor. But on the other hand side, what makes this sector so interesting and relevant to sustainability is the visibility it creates. So these people are part of They are in Portugal at the Boom Festival, and they know, most of them know, that the Boom Festival is a green festival. So all these people, they notice the sustainability measures undertaken by the events. So that's why I had the idea to set up a European campaign in the field of music events. And together with 9 other partners, we are implementing now a project called EE Music, Energy Efficient Music Culture, which is the first and the biggest energy efficiency campaign in the European music event sector. And these are our partners. One of them on the top right corner, you know already, it's Julie's Bicycle from UK, and the Green Music Initiative from Germany. And these 2 initiatives from Germany and UK, these are the pioneering initiatives in Europe who have been working together with the music and the creative industry sectors for many years now, and they have done great work and they have succeeded and really reached critical mass in their countries. So the idea of this project is to use what has been, to use the findings and experiences of these 2 national initiatives and spread it in 27 countries. So the work of Julie's Bicycle and the Green Music Initiative has produced these results, these figures. There is an energy saving potential in clubs of up to 30%, and the cost saving potential range is quite wide, depending between 800 and 8,000 euros per year, depending on the size of the club and the age of the building and so on. So we got funding for this project from a program called Intelligent Energy for Europe. And because we are contributing to the overall European Union target for energy efficiency, to increase energy efficiency by 20% until the year 2020. In the 2.5 years of our project, we are at the end of the project, but we are organizing more than 60 events, mainly workshops and trainings for the organizers of events, of festivals, of club managers, but also for energy experts. These are the 27 countries we are active in. Now, we asked the question, how can we maximize our impact? How can we leverage partnerships beyond the European Union project? Because in 27 countries, we couldn't go much in detail. We built a network in the 27 countries. We came there, we set up workshops, but that's it. we were really thinking, how can we achieve a long-term partnerships? And in one region, we managed to do so, based also on the inspiring examples of Julie's Bicycle, the Green Music Initiative, where they reached critical mass in their countries with the help of regional policy support cooperation. So the first example is Julie's Bicycle and the Arts Council of England. What they did is really very fascinating. The Arts Council made the funding of arts organizations. For the funding, they made it a requirement to use the Industry Green tool developed by Julie's Bicycle. And that tool allows for a visualization and monitoring of the carbon impact of energy use, water use, waste, audience, travel, and so on. And so the use of the tool and the participation in workshops and webinars was a prerequisite. And by the last year, 89% of all the organizations that are funded by the Arts Council are now using this Industry Green tool. The other example is the Green Club Index. It's a project by the Green Music Initiative, which are partners in EE Music. And this, in this project, they received funding by the federal state of North Rhine-Westphalia, which provided this financial support to do energy audits in 6 clubs, music clubs. So in our e-music project now, what we managed to put through or to develop is a cooperation between the region of Styria, where I am also originally from. Styria is here in the east-south part of Austria, second biggest province. And the partners are Energie Steiermark, the biggest energy provider, public-private, and the federal state of Styria. So what they say, the energy provider says, okay, actually energy efficiency is a sector where we are undermining our own business model. So when we are working in energy efficiency, we will sell less energy in the future. So that's a bit awkward. But why are we supporting this cooperation? It's because we believe there is any energy efficiency is on the agenda. There's no way to escape from it. So we are rather looking into long-term sustainability partnerships with a new target group, the music cultural sector, so that we can provide energy and sustainability consulting services. So their mission, so the main aim of this e-music Styria cooperation is to facilitate energy management in clubs and venues, the ones owned by the public sector, which are many. So by the end of next year, 25 venues should have been provided with an energy audit, and the first pilot venue is the Kunsthaus in Graz. It's a cultural center, day and night. And the cooperation was launched in February this year in Graz, and all the 80% of the men you can see on that picture are energy experts working for the energy provider, Energie Styria. And they have not worked with the music sector before, but they were trained in that workshop how to provide energy consultancy to venues and clubs in Styria. And now they are starting to work with them. And this was the evening event where we had representatives from the public sector and the local authorities and the politicians who proudly announced their support of that regional initiative. And yeah, so we're hoping to have more regions to follow this example of e-music region Styria, of Julius Bicycle Art Council, and the Green Club Index in Germany. I don't know if maybe you are near Barcelona next week. We have our final event in Barcelona on the 10th of December, where we give an award to festivals, clubs, or campaigns. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Marta. Quand l'on sait que 70% des gaz sont émis au niveau des villes, on voit
that 70% of carbon dioxide emissions come from cities. We understand how it is important to raise awareness on those questions. I think that Marta's presentation actually raised the question on how to foster virtuous circles in order to transform a pilot project on be transformed on some kind of evidence and things that can be adapted to local context, and how European funding at first that enables to reinforce an initiative and expand it can actually help to gather data that are evidence-based and that therefore can influence other political decisions. We see how the private sector can actually work on its own, but there is a moment when the private sector will need to get in touch with the public sector in order for these issues to be taken as theirs by the community of citizens. So the entire territory has to get involved for a project to continue. So we can welcome your questions for about 20 minutes until 11.
Merci. Bonjour et merci pour vos contributions. Hervé.
So hello, my name is Hervé Fournier. It is a question for both Nathalie and Clarissa. So if we think about the power of public authorities and how locally it can work. So in Bogota you spoke about the water. You said that these issues were within the cultural perimeters of the city. With whom do you actually work on those issues? Engineers, technicians? How do you work daily when you are daily dealing with the climate issues and water issues within cultural policies? It is a rather instrumental, link with the Environment Secretariat. But we work on pedagogy with artists and arts administrators and cultural agents. They work as communicators. The second level is working with the artists, creating cultural projects with local communities, and those projects deal with environment. So it's about pedagogy, communication, and creation. These projects are being made in the most complicated areas where rivers and water supply network are really in danger. So we do this with public money and with the engagement of the local communities. In 2009, we settled a climate plan, and this is through this plan that we started working on those climate and environment issues. But I think to actually implement our cultural policy, it became obvious for us to include environment within culture. We had thought about this issue in several of our actions. We thought about how transversal it could be when you deal with public affairs. Each project should not be limited to a certain field. It should extend. I mean, you have to put environment in economy, economy in art, etc. And it happened rather organically.
this question is for Clarissa. You mentioned the Museum of Waste, and I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about that, because that sounds like a very permanent project. How has it been accepted, and do you feel it's had an impact?
We are en français, non? Et je m'excuse pour mon français aussi. Mais nous avons commencé le musée des déchets avec l'institution qui travaille avec les gens qu'on appelle les recycladores, non? Et on a commencé à faire une exposition. Et donc, on cherche à établir la maison et le musée d'une façon permanente. Mais c'est qu'un commencement. C'est le même... on a fait le festival de musique avec les musiciens qui travaillent avec les gens, les recycladores, et aussi avec des instruments faits par nous. Alors, on cherche à que nos projets deviennent des continuités. On va voir ce qui se passe. Mais c'est aussi une idée qui nous est venue du Mexique. Ils font aussi un festival avec les festivals des ordures, ils l'appellent comme ça, et nous avons pensé à faire quelque chose dans ce chemin-là. On va voir ce qui se passe si on arrive.
Hello, I'm Alice Sharp. I'm from Invisible Dust, and I'm based in London. I just wanted to ask you about this private-public thing, because I don't know how it is around the world, but I imagine it's very similar, where there's big pressure on the public funding. There's a lot of pressure to reduce the public sector. Corporations are putting pressure on governments to really cut back in terms of public spending. So in terms of the UK, I work in the arts. I've worked in the arts probably for about 20 years. And this time we're having all our grants turned down. You know, lots and lots of arts organisations applying for public funding, getting turned down. That means that arts organisations are increasingly looking to the private sector for funding. And we're all faced with that problem that a lot of the private sector funding is unethical. Plus, we have the petroleum industry really trying to get into the arts. In the UK, BP sponsor the Tate and just announced a big festival called Hull City of Culture they're sponsoring. I'm just wondering how you yourselves in environmental projects tackle this problem where you want to attract funding, but some of that funding may be very much against the ethos of your organisation.
The question is for Marta. Everybody? Who wants to answer first?
Maybe I can answer in part of the question regarding the ethical issue of private funders. It seems there is no way around getting more funds from the private sector, apparently. And what concerns the music industry, there is a big potential, so the music event industry, because sponsors of festivals and events, they're always looking for interesting stories, unique stories that are different. And with sustainability measures, an event can provide these stories, be it interactive initiatives like bike-powered discos or mobile charging stations or whatever. And even, this is one thing, but even it's very hard to find private sector sponsors who are 100% ethical, depending on how strict you are. But what our take on this is, we are taking the attempts or the intentions of non-fully ethical companies serious to change that. And of course, be careful that it's not about greenwashing what they do, so to change their image into green, but underneath do the same dirty things. But we do see that also the bigger corporates, they are taking serious steps in towards sustainability. So we don't want to block them and be hardcore left-wing environmental warriors and saying, no, this we don't touch these. But actually, I mean, this is the change we need to create globally anyway, that the big corporates also change their policy. So why not support their start? And of course, monitor well what they're doing and make sure they're serious in that. But I think there's no other way to solve this.
I also think pretty much agree with what you say. After all, the public sector has its reason. I always tell my staff that we are using the taxpayers' money, and it is for the people. So sometimes you have to really be very careful when you're using taxpayers' money. But it is a lot more easier when I'm working with private money. It makes it much more flexible. We can negotiate with the business people, and not every one of them. Ethical reasons, you have to really know who you're working with. But many corporations, in fact, they have very high vision in their own corporate motives, but the board doesn't have a way to transform it now. And as you said, to negotiate and talk with them and help them to bring out their true vision sometimes and work with their staff. And then most of them have foundations anyway. So working with the foundation, and if they have the so-called PR department, most of the PR department, they have a huge budget, but just don't know how to do it right. But how to present it so that, but we make sure we are in control. That is the part that artists usually lose out because they go and ask for philanthropy instead of asking for partnership. This is where I learned from UK art and business training, that we are together as partners and that you need me just as much as I need you. So this is where the difference comes.
Dans le cas de notre pays,
in our country, Colombia, public funds are very scarce, and they usually go towards foundations or organizations that are created by those private firms, right? So this is why I think we have a reinforcement of our public sector. But we did a great movement with Agenda 21 in order to introduce within the objectives of the millennium culture as a social spending that should be regarded as an objective. We couldn't manage. Heritage is there, education is there as a clear objective, but culture could not be included. So we failed there because we need to ask for a permanent budget for culture in order to prevent, in case of crisis, to see expenditures cut in cultures first. We created a local circle of sponsors because we wanted local firms to work hand in hand with the public authorities and work on the same policy of an energetic transition. And today, all those people have the objective that we have. It's obviously clear that when you're dealing with small firms, it's more difficult. You will raise less money, and it would be more difficult if you try to implement the same type of project. But I agree with you. If you have a real ethos, then all the players of your project have to go in the same direction. I'm only thinking about what was Olivier saying at first when he said that he started with 80% of public funds and now he is only 10%. I think that what is important is to measure this double discourse.
So when we support public, it's important to actually make sure that the project is in step with the policy at the time. And when you have specific fields such as communication, that's really what we are. That's what we're working on. The communication goal replaces the project in some ways. So this can be a problem because, of course, if a large company wants to support a project, we end up being commissioned by this company, and we feel like our job is then to do advertising for the company. But that's not obviously what we want to do at all. So sometimes we actually have to educate our patrons to show them that they are actually collaborating with us. We have a project, we have ideas, and we're not just there to apply whatever they feel like having us do. Some companies, of course, are interested in themes like environment, sustainable development, etc., especially when there's something like the COP21 going on, and that's a kind of opportunism on the part of these companies. But of course, it's important that they get involved in these themes and that they work on these questions. But they may have forgotten the work that we've been doing for years to actually promote these same questions. And so we really, there's often a kind of educational job that we have for the patrons. So these hives that we have developed, we kind of have joked that it's up to the public authorities or the companies to subsidize the bees. That's how we formulate it. And in this sense, public authorities and companies, other bodies, any funding bodies really, are working with civil society, of course. And these projects, of course, are not just public or private, but it's a movement that's moving forward. And so the economic world, the financial world, has to be involved, of course, in these projects. And so we have to find a shared vocabulary, a contract that everyone understands in the same way. And what we do is when a company wants to join us, we ask the company to subsidize the bees. And if they promise perhaps 20,000 euros, and if we see that there's a gap between what they promise and the reality, so if there's a lack of funding, we ask the bees to produce 20,000 euros of honey, in quotes. I mean, this is all obviously symbolic. And we give that to the company, and just to kind of have a counterpart in the exchange. And what's important is there are big promises, big economic promises, financial promises by companies, by public authorities. And of course, this is all very dependent on individuals within the company. It's not the whole company, it's not the public authorities generally. It's often one person. And if this person disappears, the whole thing falls apart. And that fragility is really a problem. So it's about trust, it's about listening, it's about reciprocity, and we need to realize that in this association, no one should be a cannibal of the other partners.
Inspiring presentations from everyone, and I'm really there's something that seems to be emerging which is quite exciting, which is this kind of idea of new business models and a much more equal conversation between different partners and stakeholders around these environmentally themed projects. And I suppose a question I'd like to kind of ask, and maybe for panelists to unpick a bit, is whether you think or you've experienced kind of a much more entrepreneurial spirit arising either in yourselves or amongst the partners that you bring together around these projects, if that makes sense. anyone who'd like to answer, I mean, maybe Margaret, because it was so explicit in the way she said her business model was changing after this.
After all, I was an economist, and I guess I am become more an economist now. Artists, if you really want to survive, you really have to start thinking in a different way. And I cannot keep asking artists to be paid pro bono. That's why I said government funding is difficult, because there's a limit to how much I can pay to many things, according to government structures and subsidies. But I want to train the arts community and arts management more to think into a way that they have value and that they should be able to get the value. And this is how they can think clearly. What is their real worth and the value of their contribution? And be able to dare to speak up. And I think this is where I also am an enterprise. I have a company, a limited company, and that I am trying to make sure the profile is a social enterprise, that we are charging for our service as an advisory and consultancy, arts management, instead of just being a curator, but it's arts management. And that we're consulting and working with public and private and business in a way that it's for a better good in a different context. And it takes time, but this is the direction to go. And as I learned that eventually the best partnership is 1/3 from government, 1/3 from the private sector, and 1/3 from the users, the local small businesses that want their shutters and the streets to be with events, and they have to pay for it. And this is where I think it is a balanced way. And this is where I say we are in charge also, because nobody owns more than 50%.
Dans le cas, je pense que beaucoup en Amérique latine, c'est
in Latin America,
les artistes et les agents de la culture,
I think artists and actors in the cultural sector, they are often entrepreneurs.
Mais les subventions,
they have always been entrepreneurs, and subsidies need to be there, of course, because even big companies in Colombia are subsidized.
On le dit pas comme ça.
We don't perhaps say it so clearly, usually, but they are indeed subsidized. And we are always saying the artists have their hands out waiting for a handout from the government. But indeed, even big companies in Colombia have been subsidized with public funds. So that must be understood. And we want to, of course, strengthen public funding for the arts in Colombia.
Les entreprises, les projets culturels doivent être
cultural projects need to be subsidized,
dans une certaine façon.
At least to some extent. Yes. That is my firm belief.
To add on that, on the two answers, I'd like to share with you an example. Underlining, first of all, I think it's absolutely crucial that we spread, the message is spread that social, environmental consultancy or projects do already today provide opportunities to become a sustainable business model. This is very important. And one example I'd like to share with you, I've seen in Romania two environmental activists. They wanted to help the biggest festival, Electric Castle Festival in Romania, to become green, to be a green festival. And they were talking to the organizers and they said, yeah, we are interested, but there's no money. So what they did is, they just offered their voluntary support. They said, okay, we do it for free, the first and the second year, and then we sit together again, and then we see how we can collaborate in future. What happened, they managed in the first year to set up a whole army of eco-volunteers who were helping them to implement nice eco projects in the field on the festival. In the second year, they got sponsors supporting their initiatives. And in the third year, the festival noticed, okay, so these eco initiatives make our festival more interesting for sponsors. So this is something interesting, and this is something we want. And in the third year now, they get support, so they are paid by the festival, plus they have the support by the sponsors. And they founded their own small NGO, so they have an organizational structure to implement that. It's just an example I really like. It's very inspiring.
La force de la volonté. Je pense que quand on croit en quelque chose,
it's really the force of will. If we believe in something, we can
pour terminer,
manage
je pense
to
que les mots-clés qui ont été
create
dits,
it.
c'est
The
it
key
takes
words that
time,
I
c'est des
hear
processus
are
longs. Donc comment aussi la réflexion
time.
des politiques
First being
publiques, dans la
time.
conception des
These projects
instruments, des
takes
programmes,
time. It
prend en
takes time to
compte
design these
cette
policies.
dimension
And it
du
takes
temps,
time
du
for
processus.
political
On a vu
authorities to
comment
take
les
into
financements
account these
publics
questions
peuvent
in these
avoir un
projects.
effet levier, être là au début
Indeed,
et
public
accompagner
authorities or
le
public
changement,
funding
la
can
transformation des
be leveraged at the
organisations
beginning,
culturelles,
help
y compris dans leur modèle économique,
companies
parce que grâce
and
à des partenariats
structures
multi-acteurs avec le secteur
with these
privé, la
multi-actor
recherche, le monde
partnerships with
économique,
research,
on
with
arrive
the
à
economic
construire
world,
des
with all
nouveaux
these
projets
different
et de
partners,
nouveaux modèles
we
économiques.
manage to get
Et ensuite,
to create
l'enjeu de la
new economic
transversalité et
models
de la
and new
participation, je
projects.
voudrais y revenir. On a dit que souvent les projets,
Participation
c'était
has
un
been
des
evoked
soucis
a lot
sur
this
lesquels, en
morning
termes
as
de
well.
fait, Margaret nous a laissé. Ça tient souvent aux personnes, Olivier l'a rappelé
Often,
aussi.
as
Bah,
Olivia
comment on
just
fait en
said,
sorte que ça ne
these
tienne pas aux
projects
personnes,
are
c'est pas les
often
processus
based on the
participatifs,
work of
ça,
one
le cadre
person
de
or a
Horizon
few
nous le
people,
prouve.
and so it's extremely
Si la
important to get as many
communauté
people involved
souhaite
as
quelque
possible.
chose, elle en
If a
sera en
community
demande
wants
auprès des pouvoirs
something,
politiques, même quand ceux-ci ne
the
sont pas
community
convaincus.
is going
Dans les
to
cas de
go
Bogota,
to
c'est un
the
pouvoir
political
politique qui est
authorities.
convaincu et qui est même sur le
And
devant de
that's
la
very
scène pour
important.
dire
And
les
in
arts et la
Colombia, it's
culture
the
peuvent faire le
opposite. We see the
changement
public
pour notre
authorities
maison commune, le monde
actually
et
have
l'environnement.
the right mentality and are
Et cette
helping
transversalité,
this
et je viens
change
juste, je
take place through
termine
the
sur
society more generally.
l'agenda 2030, donc la
And
question
just
de
to finish
l'inclusion de
with
la
the
culture
Agenda 2020
dans
and the
la nouvelle
inclusion of
stratégie pour
culture
le
and the
développement
new
durable.
strategy for
Effectivement, on
sustainable
n'est pas
development.
arrivé à obtenir ce qu'on
Indeed,
souhaitait,
we
mais c'est
did
dans la
not manage to get what we
transversalité qu'on
wanted,
peut trouver des nouvelles
but
énergies et
we are
peut-être,
here
comme
and
dans
we
les
can
cas
find
de nos amis
energy
roumains,
in the work
montrer
of
qu'en
our
collaborant ensemble, art
colleagues
et
here, and this
culture,
Romanian
art,
example is a
culture
very
et
good one.
environnement, art,
How
culture
art,
et
culture and
économie, on
environment
peut
and
changer le
art,
monde et
culture
peut-être
and
dans quelques
economics
années, on aura
can
notre
all work
objectif
together and
culture.
change the world. And I hope in the future we will be able to get culture into a
Merci à tout
sustainable
le monde pour
development
l'attention.
strategy. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for this panel. I would like also to take the opportunity of this panel to thank very much the network UCLG. I hope I said it right every time. The network of local government and cities, because thanks to the coordination of Jordi Pasquale and Jordi Balta, we have different representatives of cities from different parts of the world, from Latin America to Asia and of course Europe, and in particular Leonidas here and Clarissa, and yesterday with Alain Fouquet. So thank you very much for this partnership. It's also through that type of partnership that we could make this event. I would like to propose maybe before the next session, which will be a little bit smaller. It was not planned in the program, but if you want like a maximum 10 minutes break, at least to get out and walk a bit or something like that. And I also would like, and also it will help the translator to have a small break. Thank you again very much for this morning for the translation. And I also would like to mention, it's very practical, but it's very important. Maybe some of you took yesterday by mistake in your bag the headset for the translation. So if it is the case, please don't forget also today to bring them back, because we all need them back. Thank you very much, and in 10 minutes, so at 11:20, we come back here. Thank you.